What's up, everyone? Welcome to this day in Philly sports history for March 2nd, 2023. A couple housekeeping things before we get in. Just a quick update from yesterday. I was stuck on where the 1980 Olympics were that were boycotted, that Nikki Frank was not able to compete in. They were indeed in Moscow. So the 80 Olympics were in Moscow. The Soviet Union boycotted the Winter Olympics in Lake Placid. So the United States did the same thing for the Summer Olympics in Moscow. Also, want to wish a happy birthday to a good friend of mine, Jill, who usually listens. I know her son listens as well, so happy birthday, Jill. Welcome to the club. Quick Back to the Future update. Did drop last night's episode on the state of the Sixers. And speaking of the Sixers, went on a nice little Doc Rivers rant on the podcast. And then all of a sudden last night, no Joel Embiid. Sixers win 119-96. I'll give it up. Doc finally switched up his rotations, kept Niang on the bench, had House complaints a little bit, who played well. He had Maxey in the starting lineup. They played with a little bit of energy, and for some reason, I can't put my finger on why. He coaches completely different when Joe is not in the lineup versus when he is. So if we could somehow get that combination of Doc with Joe and post without Joe, maybe they'd be on to something. But good win for the Sixers against the Heat. Big game coming up this weekend against the Bucks. I'm talking about a measuring stick. Bucks have been white hot. I didn't see what they did last night yet, but so good win for the Sixers. I'll give it up. I was a little fired up on the podcast. Even the dog was barking, but he proved me wrong. I'll give it up to him, but he needs to do that consistently. And I don't know why he coaches different with Joe versus without Joe, but we'll see. Quick Eagles news update. The big story yesterday was C.J. Gardner-Johnson in a tweet that has since been deleted. Tweeted at the Jonathan Gannon interview where he was going through and chronicling what went wrong in the second half in the Super Bowl. And I'll paraphrase, but basically C.J. Gardner-Johnson was like, y'all didn't put us in a position to make plays or something along those lines. And everybody's like, oh, there's dissension among the... First of all, C.J. Gardner-Johnson is going to be a free agent. I think he needs to be a priority for them to sign. But he's also saying exactly what we all said about the Super Bowl and Jonathan Gannon anyway. I still think there's something up there where he stayed in Arizona. I don't know whether Howie pulled some strings or whether this was a plan the whole time. But either way, shout out to you, C.J. Gardner-Johnson, for saying what we were all thinking. I know he's very vocal and does post a lot of things like that on social media, but from a playing standpoint, I definitely want him back next year. Flyers lost 3-2 in overtime to the Rangers, I believe. I should have looked that up. But either way, they continue to be in a downward spiral heading into the trade deadline, which is tomorrow afternoon. So hopefully we'll get some of those Flyers guys out of there. The guys that basically are eating contracts aren't part of the future, and we can move on from there. And yes, they did lose to the Rangers last night. All right, this day in Philly sports history, we're going to go all the way back to 1962 to one of the most iconic moments in not only Philadelphia sports history, but also NBA history. And on this night, March 2nd, 1962, Wilt Chamberlain of the Philadelphia Warriors scored 100 points in the NBA in a game, which is the NBA record. The Warriors beat the Knicks 169-147. The game took place in Hershey. And I don't know why, but if you listen to the podcast we did on Joe Frazier where I interviewed my dad, he had mentioned that the NBA wasn't on TV a lot and it wasn't as big. They were still trying to grow it. This is pre the Sixers even being in Philly. So I guess it was just a conflict of, I don't know whether it would be a conflict of interest. They were trying to expand the game, but for whatever reason, they played in Hershey. So on this night, he broke his own NBA scoring record of 78. He got the 100-point with about 8 minutes left. And then from there, once he broke his record and got past he had his 79th point, it was sort of like, let's get Wilt the record. So every play down then, they were trying to get the ball into him, and the Knicks saw it. So the Knicks were trying to foul everybody else to avoid having this happen, because it basically turned into like a mockery of a game at the end. So then the Warriors got pissed off and did the same thing and kept fouling the Knicks. So it just drug on forever. It was very sloppy. But he did get the record on a slam dunk. Basically, it was a 5-on-1 slam dunk. The Warriors, everybody was open and everybody was hacking him and whatever. So he was able to score 100 points. The game was not televised. And like I said with the interview with my dad, the NBA wasn't on that much. And even more surprising is the game itself did not get, or the feed itself, I should say, didn't get a ton of praise and accolade and coverage, because basically Wilt was just that kind of guy that they just chalked it up to another kind of Wilt being Wilt. Almost like when you would see guys like Kobe Bryant or Michael Jordan, or even LeBron to a certain point, when they do these amazing things on the court, everybody just sort of like assumes that, yeah, that's what you do. So pretty, I guess in the grand scheme of things, a pretty cool stat. So it almost made it just like, okay, that's what he's going to do. Can he score 200 points? But what made this more legendary, and Wilt was in an interview later, he's like, I've had like 10,000 people come up to me and say, oh, I was in Madison Square Garden when you scored your 100 points. And he always just laughed about it because it was just the stuff. The legend of it grew after the fact. But he was like, okay, that's great. It was in Hershey and only 4,000 people were there. But he was like, whatever, like just go with it. Just quickly with the top scoring games in NBA history, because if you're anything like me, you're probably like going through and everybody knows a couple of them. But Wilt owns 5 of the top 10 scoring games in NBA history. He scored 100, 78. He scored 73 twice, 72, and 70. The closest anybody has come was Kobe, who scored 81 in 2006. Just the other night, Damian Lillard scored 71, so that's been the highest in a while. So, I mean, it's definitely, in a team game like this, it is a very hard thing to do. So shout out to Wilt Chamberlain, who on this day in 1962 scored 100 points in a game against the Knicks in Hershey. I guess it would have been Hershey Park at the time, but in Hershey. All right, so today's Philly Sports Women's History Spotlight, we're going to go to Monet Davis. And you might remember her. She was born in 2001 in Philadelphia. Probably best known for 2014 when she captured the region as well as the country for the Taney Dragons in the Little League World Series. She was the 4th American girl to ever play in the Little League World Series, the sixth girl to get a hit overall. There's been a lot of international girls. She was the first girl pitcher to win a game in the Little League World Series, and this story just gripped the country at the time, and it basically is inspiring to everybody. You have the female aspect, you have the black aspect, you have just in general proving doubters wrong aspect. So she was an inspiration to everyone. She was on the cover of Sports Illustrated. The first young girl to do that, young girl of color, no less. They did fall short in the United States Championship game of that Little League World Series that year, but she, like I said, captured and just showed that anybody can do anything if you put your mind to it. She did go on. She had a pretty decent softball career at Hampton University. She currently is still at Hampton. She graduates in May. She has aspirations to become a broadcaster. I've seen some interviews with her. She definitely is going to be super successful once she graduates in May and gets a job. So today we shout out Monet Davis for Philly Sports Women's History Month Spotlight. Wilt Chamberlain on this day scored 100 points in a game in 1962. Go check out Back to the Future. We ripped Doc a little bit, who maybe he was listening and he switched some things up. So maybe I just need to go on every week and just rip Doc, and if it's going to lead to play like that. Check out CJ Gardner-Johnson's tweets about Jonathan Gadden. Go have yourselves a Thursday, and until next time, I'll see you when I see you.